So, our proposed data analysis is a post intervention outcome evaluation. We want to assess the major differences and barriers to academic success between undergraduate students and graduate students. We'll do this first by hiring an external resource person who will come on with any, unbiased opinions or perspectives, and they will oversee maintenance and analysis activities. And they'll have prior knowledge and experience in the field, and they'll especially have prior experience with the methodologies that we're interested in using in our evaluation. They will also partake in an online data software training session just to ensure their knowledge and integrity. So we'll begin, like I mentioned, with the post-session surveys, and we want to identify any major demographic trends between our two study groups, being undergraduate students and graduate students, rather than a rigorous intervention design that includes a control group. We'll just be assessing the two groups of interest in our evaluation. So like I mentioned, we want to start with our descriptive statistics, so using things like frequencies and percentages to represent our categorical data. This will then be even more organized and put into an Excel spreadsheet by the data analyzer, who will then clean the information and identify any potential barriers or discrepancies so that data is clean and ready to be analyzed. They will also be using things like means and measures of central tendency to compare the two groups, the undergraduate versus graduate groups. Data interpretation will be done by both the analyzer and our team, as well as our stakeholder, just so that there's not one perspective on the matter. It'll come from, each position on the team and have more of a comprehensive viewpoint. And so data is to be assessed ideally at 2 points. Future research, we would like to have it assessed at 3 points. The first being before students complete their wellness coaching sessions. This will be, data will be extracted through pre-session intake forms. And then again, as I mentioned, after students finish their 5 sessions, we'll extract data from the post-session evaluation forms. And from here, the data analyzer is going to look at the significance of our data by looking at the major differences and identifying a null hypothesis, which would mean that there is no difference between the groups, and they're going to use a p-value to establish confidence in this null hypothesis. So these are some of the measures we're going to use in our evaluation. And then differences in means between pre and post-session evaluation surveys, like I mentioned, will be assessed using a t-test. And so from here, variations in the needs specifically that will be kind of more qualitative forms will be coded by the analyzer, who will then put that coded information into their, organizational spreadsheet to identify any major discrepancies or differences in means. The final thing that will be used is an ANOVA test to, like I said, identify any variations that potentially may exist between the two groups. Our success essentially will be identified looking at past evaluations and using the outcomes from those and kind of comparing it to our own and seeing where the major differences lie, where, maybe potential endeavors for future research may lie. And our stakeholder, Dr. Garcia, will have access to this information from past evaluations that we can use to assess our own information. And limitations for this, the primary one would be how the post-session forms specifically are voluntary. So the lower the response rate, the lower the amount of data we get, and the lower the variation in that data, which makes it less representative of the actual population that we're sampling. And then it also just kind of hinders and waters down the information that we are given because it's so low in quantity. Another limitation would be that it's time consuming. As I mentioned, we want to do 2 different data assessments, one at the beginning and one at the end. And students are begin these sessions at different time points. So it could be kind of messy, the timeline of it, trying to follow so many different students. That will eat up a lot more time, resources, and money. So those all include the limitations for our proposed data analysis.